When smart people lose money, it's not, they lose 10%. It's always a catastrophe, like drawdowns, bro. Drawdowns.
Do you think there will be a lot more BS retail ideas?
There's a group of stocks out there in the stock market that retail keeps buying. If they had a knowledge of history, they know how that story is going to end. Younger generations that don't have analog training, that haven't read the book, that just look at snippets and snack on information, they're going to lose a lot of money. We're already seeing it happen. Don't do violence to yourself in the morning. These guys that are plunging into ice cold baths when they first wake up, that's stupid.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to Odds on Open. This week, we're going to be doing something slightly different. One of my mentors, a hedge fund manager by the name of Alix Pasquet, is going to be giving a talk on why smart people lose money. I hope you guys enjoy.
Ethan, really, thank you for having me. Okay, to be asked to speak publicly about any topic is a great honor, and I try to add a lot of value. Part of our content strategy is to add value. Having a content strategy is very important for us. It helps us make money, but it also helps us generate insights and to get feedback on our ideas. If our ideas are wrong, believe me, the crowd will quickly tell us that it is. But often the crowd also adds value to you when you share your content. It's actually a mistake smart people make, which is not to share their thinking, especially publicly. But anyways, so my background is that I am probably not genetically designed or culturally designed to make money. I come from the Caribbean, not a place known for their capital allocators. I studied gains for growing up. I was obsessed with gains. I went to business school, to Babson, but really all I did during college was play poker and backgammon, and even played poker and backgammon with my teachers. Sometimes would let them win to get better grades. But my background, I wasn't designed to be an analyst. I never learned accounting. I took accounting class, but I never really sat there and learned accounting, modeling, or any of these things. But after college, I gambled for a living. Spent 3 years doing that, playing backgammon and poker, and I'll get to that. And then one of the guys I used to gamble with was a very wealthy businessman. He offered me a job to come run his personal money. And because I did not know what the hell I was doing, that businessman had an interesting model. He would take young guys that he liked and he thought were usually more street smart than smart, put a lot of pressure on them, and basically throw them in the deep end of the pool and say, "Can you swim?" And if you knew how to swim, he would put more and more responsibilities on you. And I loved him dearly, both him and his son. And I still can't believe they gave me the responsibilities that they gave me at the time, because I seriously did not know my ass from my elbow. But I started out allocating money to money managers. And that's where I really learned investing, by literally taking meetings with other money managers and just asking them questions. And whoever I thought was smart, we would give them money. And it was one of the best schools for investing that you could have. And I'll get to that. All right. So the topic is, why do smart people lose money? I'm fascinated by this for a lot of reasons. One of them is, I'm forced in our business to compete against people that are much, much smarter than I am. And how do you do that? How do you compete against smart people that are better resourced than you, have more experience than you, and also have teams that are bigger than yours and smarter than yours? I mean, it's uncanny how much money people are spending on resources now in the investment business. So how can we, as a firm, Prime Macaya, compete against these really, really smart guys that are out there? But also, how do you mitigate the catastrophic mistakes smart people can make? I find that to be a fascinating topic. And I'll walk you guys through how I came to some of those insights. Okay. All right. First, a couple of quotes. One by Phil Birnbaum. You gain more by not being stupid than you do by being smart. Smart gets neutralized by other smart people. Stupid does not. By Thomas Sowell. There is usually only a limited amount of damage that can be done by dull or stupid people. For creating a truly monumental disaster, you need people with high IQs. One of my favorite quotes from the big guy, that's what I call Warren Buffett, by the way. He said, over time, markets will do extraordinary, even bizarre things. A single big mistake could wipe out a long string of successes. We therefore need someone genetically programmed to recognize and avoid serious risks, including those never before encountered. Certain perils that lurk in investment strategies cannot be spotted by use of the models commonly employed today by financial institutions. Temperament is also important. Independent thinking, emotional stability, and a keen understanding of both human and institutional behavior is vital to long-term investment success. I've seen a lot of very smart people who have lacked these virtues. This was written before the age of AI. It's one of my beliefs that AI is going to make the things that Warren talked about worse, at least for the first growing pains that we're going to go through as we use these AI tools. I'll get to that. All right, so what you're looking at here is a theme. So we're big into themes in our business. We're always looking for tailwinds that are pushing our businesses forward if we're long, or headwinds that are pushing our businesses back if we're short. And we like to find tailwinds that other people are not thinking about. And one of them is what we call the generational battle. So the first baby boomer is turning 80 next year. The first baby boomer was born in 1946. And in terms of wealth, that generation has $76 trillion in the United States. Gen X, which is my generation, by the way, I call Gen X neo-boomers because we were raised by boomers and we have boomer sensibilities, but we were the first to really use the internet. So we're both analog and digital. I'm a Gen X, by the way, and our generation has 37 trillion. The silent generation, so this would be your grandparents, your great-grandparents, my grandparents, they have 19 trillion. And then the millennials have 13 trillion, and we don't know how much the Zoomers have, but you guys are popping up. So basically what's happening is the first baby boomer is reaching 80 next year, and as he's passing, that wealth is trickling down to the generations. It's going to Gen X, then millennial, and the baby Zoomers, right? And that wealth is causing a generational battle. Why? Because millennials and the Zoomers are taking this money and actually putting into the stock market, right? That's actually one of the explanations for the persistent retail bid that we are seeing. Because people are like, where is this retail get this cash from? Why do retail keep buying these stocks and coins? Well, one of the reasons is they're inheriting money, right? Reason why I put that in there is you guys have a problem, the Zoomers. It's a generation that no longer reads. All the information is in digital media and short content. The problem is to really develop judgment as a smart person, you have to read. You have to do what's called analog training. I mean, I don't know if I say that's called that. Sorry, it's what we call it. And analog training is disconnected mental training that older generations had to do more of because we didn't have the digital tools. And we believe that the future of investment performance is guys that have both analog weapons and digital weapons. Okay. By the way, value investors specifically, smart value investors have to pay attention to this stuff because the mistakes that they're making right now are borderline catastrophic. And we've tried explaining that to some of our value investor friends. But one of the problems of value investing is that almost all the reference material that they've learned is pre-2008 reference materials. Since 2008, things have changed. The market structure has changed. There's new investment players. Businesses, especially internet-enabled businesses, have changed, and so have business tactics. And a lot of things that drove cheap valuations almost no longer exist. It's totally different things that drive cheap valuation. The availability of information that could make something cheap pre-2008 doesn't exist today. Usually when something is cheap today, it has a problem, right? All right. Don't be the E-Trade baby.
A lot of people are like, isn't it difficult to invest in the markets? And I'm like, not if you're using E-Trade. Making a big investment is as easy as a single click. Boom. I just bought some stocks. See, it was totally easy. Check this out. Boom. More stocks. Boom. Asset-backed securities. Boom. Credit default swaps. Boom. 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 Hell, I don't even know what half this stuff means. But thanks to E-Trade, I can... Wait. Why is this line going down? Oh, God. Just dropped 400 points. This is not happening. Dear Lord, I made a horrible, horrible mistake. Dropping more. I want to take it back. I want to take it back. Sell. No. Too late. It's all gone. I just lost my entire life savings. Oh, God. Steph was saving for med school. Shit. I think I'm going to be sick. Ow. Yeah. I'm going to jump out the window now.
E-Trade. Sorry, you can't take it back. In 25 years of doing this, I gotta sound like a fucking boomer. In 25 years of doing this, I've seen a lot of smart people go through every emotion that the E-Trade baby has gone through. I've seen grown men cry when they lose money. I've seen people having to move their families to cheaper neighborhoods and cheaper schools because they lost everything. Okay? And really high IQ people at that. I've seen guys that I would consider average become billionaires. Okay? So when you study the dynamic range between an average investor and a great investor, one of the things that you see is that IQ and intelligence is actually a small percentage of what drives our success. Okay? The first place that I saw this was games and playing games for a living. So my story with backgammon is when I was 18, I saw my uncles play the game. And I remember we were by at the beach and they were playing, and I had noticed them playing before, but that moment I started paying attention, and I noticed that there was probability, and I was obsessed with probability at the time. And I learned the rules. I played with them, and they got very cocky with me as they were beating me because I didn't know how to play. So I got pissed. I went back home and I bought all the books on backgammon that I could find. Right? There was actually a gambling store in France, and they had all these backgammon books. I bought them all. I read them, got better, came back a couple months later, and trounced my uncles. Okay? Graduated high school, went to college. There was a backgammon club in Boston. I think it was called the Cavendish. I went to play there, and a Chouette, which is backgammon more than two people, and they killed me. Lost a bunch of money. I was too cocky. I got pissed. I found out that the best player in the world lived in Boston. I hired him to give me lessons, came back 6 months later, and I killed all these guys at that club. And then I was introduced to the backgammon neural nets. So a lot of people don't know this, but the first neural nets were developed to play backgammon. Well, to be fair, the first neural nets were developed by intelligence services, mostly IARPA, DARPA, the CIA, Mossad, and the others. And then as these people left to go to academia, they started introducing these neural nets, and one of them was developed to play backgammon. A guy called Gerard Tesoro at IBM in the 80s, he built a program called TD Gammon. This was actually really useful, by the way, because to understand AI, because the mistakes that people made using AI and backgammon, they're also making them in the investment world. Same mistakes. It's also the same mistakes as being done with AI in chess, same mistakes that are being done with AI in Go, and so on. But basically, my process for getting better at the game was playing against smart players for not a lot of money, and also hiring coaches. And imagine my surprise when you could use that same process to improve at investing. But the first place that I started seeing smart people make mistakes is that in backgammon, you have all these great players, and the problem is sometimes to make money, they like to compete against each other. And I noticed that if you wanted to make a lot of money gambling, you shouldn't do that. And it wasn't about ego, about being the best player. Is to really make a lot of money, you had to find rich backgammon players that had big egos that did not know how to play as well as you did. And if you did that, you could consistently make money. Same thing in poker, same thing in gin, and basically any game of strategy and chance mixed together. Okay? But there were also other lessons. If you study poker, for example, very quickly, it lends you to study the metagame, ranges. All of these are very powerful lessons that you can apply to investing. But the first big mistake that smart people make is wanting to compete against other smart people. No. When you're fiduciarily responsible for other people's capital, it's your duty to compete against morons. Okay, you cannot risk capital. Competing against smart people is a very, very stupid thing to do. Okay. So one of the guys I used to gamble with, very smart businessman, gave me a job, and I ran money for him. And I applied that same lesson from poker and backgammon to investing. And basically go meet with smart people, read all the books on investing. I still can't believe, by the way, that people will write books, spend 2 years writing books that they sell for $15, and you can get all those lessons in less than a day sometimes. But it was very powerful when I got into investing to apply the same process. Find smart people, read books, ask for advice. But one of the beauties of investing is if you're playing poker in the middle of a hand, you cannot call a smart guy and say, hey, what do you think I should do? Whereas investing, you actually can, right? And that's actually a lesson that I still do today. If I don't know what to do about something, I literally will call a smart person about my idea and just say, hey, what do you think about this? But we'll get to that. But then in 2006, my mentor became president of a very large, well-known quant fund. And so did his stepson, who was a very close friend of mine. And we never invested in quant funds because I never really understood what they did. And my mentor said, hey, we have a problem. The family office community knows that you and I are close. And they keep asking, has Alix invested? Has Alix invested? And we need to be able to solve for that, right? So can you come and do some work on us? I'm like, well, you guys are known for being secretive. I need to be able to understand what you guys do, because if there's a period of underperformance, I have to know whether to cut the position or to actually add because it's a momentary lapse in performance. You guys, look, there's a lot we can't share with you, but come in, we'll give you access and you'll learn from the team. And for a period of a few months, I had access to some of the smartest quant investors in the world. And it was incredible. And one of the things that they taught me was that every quant fund has to solve for about 6 problems. The first is having access to data. It's actually really, really hard and expensive to have access to all of the data sources that you need to run a quant strategy well, right? It's not as easy as you think. And the barrier to entry, it's really expensive. Not only that, you need decades of that data. The second problem quant funds have to solve for is scrubbing the data. Sometimes when you run a quant model that's supposed to find investment anomalies or trading anomalies in it, it finds a piece that it thinks an anomaly. And the problem is that's actually a data entry mistake. And do you know, as a team of engineers, how to scrub that data? It's a very complicated process, and you have to know. The third is lowering your market impact when you trade. So you find a signal and you think it's an anomaly. Can you put a trade in that actually doesn't create market movement and the anomaly, so that it's almost like the Heisenberg principle that observing something can actually affect that thing, where trading something can actually impact? So how to lower your market impact? The next is, how do you lower your transaction costs? It's actually not easy and requires scale and the right relationships with the brokers. And then next is access to leverage. Often the anomalies that these quant funds find is so small that you need leverage to be able to amplify that. How do you manage that in those trading systems? And then last is, how do you find really, really smart people, manage them, incentivize them, and that's not easy. And the founder of that quant fund, one of his genius, other than intellectual heft, was also, he was a really good businessman and very street smart, which is very usually unusual that you're street smart and book smart at the same time. But anyways, it was amazing because I actually saw how smart people had thought about all the problems of not only dealing of making money, but managing other smart people. And one interesting thing is when I asked them, hey, you guys can't tell us any signals today, but are there any older signals that you guys have found that you guys have used in the past that are no longer viable? And yeah, it's easy. One of our first signals is in the 80s, we noticed that market specialists did not like to go home with positions on. So around 355, and a lot of positions they had in inventory, they would actually sell those off. And the stocks would go down imperceptibly, right? And they realized that they could build a quant signal that could pick up on which are these stocks and actually short them around 350 and cover them right before the close and make a small amount of money that with leverage could actually become a decent amount of performance, right? And when he said that, the insight we had is that, unlike the other quant funds that use, let's say, statistical arbitrage, these guys actually exploit human behavior. And that's actually was very valuable in terms of us understanding what they actually did, right? But even that wasn't enough for us to really understand what they did. And one of the things because they were very secretive, I noticed that the majority of them had gone to one school, right? So I literally took a trip to that school, had meetings with all the teachers and said, hey, what do you teach? And this was where my development as a fundamental investor picked up, because I started understanding the philosophies that this firm was using to actually make money, including chaos theory, complexity, systems thinking, and others, right? And that was actually very, very useful. And again, that was another lesson. If you're very, very smart, you have to study systems thinking, complexity, cybernetics, network theory, and others, because a lot of the mistakes of judgment smart people make, you solve for that by studying those things. But anyways, that also led me to understand August of 2007, when the quant funds were blowing up, what actually was happening. And that saved our fund, actually, because I ran my first hedge fund I started in 2006, and we were up 35% in 2007. But August alone, we dropped 10% because when quant funds were deleveraging, a lot of our longs went down and our shorts went up. We made most of that back in the end of Q3 and Q4, but still, understanding how the quants were blowing up because I had studied them before was actually very helpful. Okay, so sorry, I lost my train of thought. But anyways, it's very powerful, and there are books on the quant funds that you can read, by the way. And I would definitely ask Ethan for advice on that. Okay. So one of the things about the younger generations right now is hyper-stimulation. And one of the things we noticed is young guys don't handle market swings up and down as well as the older ones. And that's actually something that didn't used to happen. There's a problem right now in the investment business called the junior-senior problem. And a lot of PMs are noticing that they don't want to hire juniors anymore. They don't want to hire junior guys, right? That's a problem. And they say, look, they know how to model. They learn the pod talk early in college, ADOs and factors and such. But if you ask them, hey, what do you think the CEO is thinking? They don't have the strategic reference points to be able to put themselves in the shoes of the CEO and saying, look, this is what he said, but here's what he actually is thinking of doing, or see the competitive reaction. And the other part of the junior-senior problem is the junior guys don't handle pressure as much as the senior guys. And I think one of the reasons is the overuse of hyperstimulants. By the way, I have a similar problem. I had to quit caffeine, right? I started drinking coffee late in 2016, and I was noticing that, wow, like a stock was going against me, and usually I'm able to emotionally regulate, and I wasn't able to. And it's when I quit caffeine that a lot of that came back, right? And caffeine is a hyperstimulant. As much as I love me a great cup of espresso, I had to quit. And maybe I have it once or twice a year now, sadly, but caffeine just makes my highs higher, my lows lower. And the ability to self-regulate is something that sometimes very smart people don't have. And I really do believe that hyperstimulants cause that. Alcohol, nicotine, social media, caffeine, recreational drugs, porn. And by the way, sometimes we have a theme called the modern addict. You see somebody drinking a cup of coffee, vaping while he's on Instagram at the same time. That has an impact on your thinking. Okay. And by the way, we're all guilty of it. You have to figure out a way to minimize it, or better yet, for example, manage it. So if you hyperstimulate, you need to do things like massage, sauna, cardio, and working out, because it helps clear these from your system. Okay. So what are the mistakes that smart people make? One of the first ones, wanting to compete against other smart people. Don't do it. You know, one of my favorite analysts in the beginning of his career, Ethan, there you go. uh, and beginning of his career, he used to love to compete against Viking, Lone Pine, Blue Ridge. Even he's like, here's what these guys are thinking, but here's why. I'm like, dude, no. That's not your job. Your job is not to compete against the smartest people you've ever seen. Okay, your job to compete against morons. Okay, and if you don't think other great investors don't have that mentality, it's what we call the prime pattern. The prime pattern is when an institution or individual is taking advantage of a competitively disadvantaged institution or individual. Look at what Charlie says. Competency is a relative thing. What I needed to get ahead was to compete against idiots. And luckily, there's a large supply. And Warren Buffett. If you've been playing poker for half an hour, you still don't know who the patsy is, you're the patsy. By the way, the strategic implication of that is find game to have a lot of patsies. So this book by Willis Johnson, one of my favorites, is From Junk to Gold, a story of Copart. This guy would took junkyards, which is usually historically run by people that are not very educated, and he brought sophisticated business techniques to that space and eventually consolidated and became one of the best businesses out there. We love this business. We've held it at various moments throughout my career. One of my mentors used to be on the board of the company. And that's the kind of competing that you want to do. So one of my favorite stories on this is to protect the guilty, I won't name, but a very close friend of mine, his father studied engineering at MIT. And he moves back to his home country, and people are like, what are you going to do? Are you going to start a think tank? Are you going to join the government? He's like, no, I'm going to start a car repair shop. And he said, what? Why are you going to do that? And he's like, just, I think it's a good business to go into. And he owns now one of the largest car repair shops. And it's almost a monopoly in that country. And the reason why, when I asked him, why did you do that? And he said, did you see who I was competing with? He was competing against car mechanics that were doing this as almost like a lifestyle business. And he just trounced all these guys. That's the kind of thinking that you need to do. If you're going to be smart, you need to stop competing against other smart people. Compete against idiots. Okay? Trust me on this. Now, smart people can make really dumb mistakes. Okay? And it's a lot of fun to be able to exploit that when it's happening. It's rare, but it's possible. Okay. Smart people do a lot of networking mistakes. They don't belong to multiple networks. Okay. So what I mean by that is they tend to have one network and then belong to just that. Whereas you should join multiple networks. So for example, we've tried to build a network to be East Coast based, West Coast based. To have a network in Europe, to have a network in Southeast Asia. And I want to belong to multiple networks. So there's my backgammon network, there's my poker network, there's my investing network, there's all the geeky stuff that I study. Recently, we did a case study on the NFL. It's the case study that keeps on making us money because a lot of the new tactics that we've learned from the NFL, we're applying it to investing. Like, for example, in the NFL, there's a concept called football intelligence. And we've realized that young investors that have great investing intelligence tend to be better analysts. And we have ways of picking up on investing. We call investing intelligence now. So, how can you belong to multiple networks? You have to think about that. Having an underutilized network. A lot of smart people tend to know a lot of people, but they don't keep in touch with the network or know how to utilize it for idea generation, idea confirmation. Now, having a lot of triads in your networks. So I've spoken about this in other of my talks. So triads is when you've introduced two people to each other And Judaism, it's called a mitzvah to introduce a man and a woman together. It's a blessing. I'm not Jewish, by the way, but one of my mentors is, and he's been teaching me, and I've applied that. How do you do business mitzvahs? So one of the things that I do if I'm studying an idea is I always say, hey, who are the two smartest people that I'm collaborating with this idea that don't know each other that I can introduce to? The more triads you have in your network, the more you perform or you're successful. The sociologists have actually done great work on that. Now refreshing your network. The smart people tend to consolidate with a group that they have, and they very rarely go and meet new people. And then too many dormant ties, which is people that that you haven't spoken with. You have to fix all of that. Smart people tend to love intricate complexities. It's kind of how they show they're smart. A very close friend of mine runs a fund, and he was invested in a name where literally to understand it and to make money in it, you have to understand California weather patterns. Okay. And the analyst that was covering that for him was intellectually arrogant, and he loved this idea, but he also lost $400 million investing in it. Right. It's not intricate complexities that matter. It's actually finding unrecognized simplicities that matter. Right. And this quote, most geniuses, especially those who lead others, prosper not by deconstructing intricate complexities, but by exploiting unrecognized simplicity. It's something that is simple that no one is really looking at, that really you're going to be making money on. Smart people love to be right. And again, as the words of Stan Druckenmiller, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about how much money you make when you're right minus how much you lose when you're wrong. I'm wrong all the time. And it's okay. But I like to be the first to recognize that I am wrong. And I have designed my friends to literally grab me by the shirt, slap me around, me like, hey, jackass, you're about to make a mistake. And it's okay. And I'm okay with making mistakes. And then you realize, all right, you made a mistake. So what? Move on. Okay. Learn from it, but move on. Try not to repeat it. And it's actually one of the qualities of great investors is they tend to not repeat that big mistake again. Okay. But it's very important to be able to let go of being right. One of the smartest macro thinkers I know is one of the worst money makers I've ever seen, mostly because he wants to be right. Not being emotionally developed. Okay. For a smart person in the mid-20s, much more important to go develop your emotional side and not be emotionally repressed than it is to go and learn modeling skills, for example. Take a dance class, travel, preferably as a group activity, what's called a compound experience. Learn new languages, try new foods, have novel experience, constantly meet new people. Learn diverse skills, especially if you're shy. Go learn comedy, improv, public speaking, acting even. There's a concept called dynamic evaluation. It's one of the new ones for us. And since we started doing that, our performance has improved, which is that if I'm studying an idea, instead of putting my strength in play, I put my weaknesses in play as well. So for example, if an analyst is shy and he's reporting to me on an idea, I'll always be like, okay, I need you to call 5 people that you don't know and ask them these questions. So that since his weakness is shyness, putting that weakness into motion actually helps you make money. Okay, we learned that concept from a psychologist called Phil Stutz, who I'm kind of obsessed with right now. If you haven't seen Stutz, the documentary on him by Jonah Hill on Netflix, it's a must watch. It's one of these things where maybe I got exposed to it when I needed to, but I literally improved when I learned and studied all his books, his interviews. I did a deep dive on him last year. Fascinating, must learn, especially if you're a very smart person. Okay. So Taleb wrote this amazing piece, in a very Talebian way, usually filled with insults and very, very smart sarcasm. But I actually think this is required reading for today. And he calls it The Intellectual Yet Idiot. It's a chapter in one of his books called Skin in the Game. You can actually find it for free on Medium. There's a lot of people in academia, leadership, governance, governments that are intellectual but yet morons. And you have to kind of know when you're dealing with one. By the way, there's a lot of these guys in the investment business as well. Okay, lack of self-awareness. Big mistake smart people make. You don't know your power zone. What are the ideas that are your power zone that if you invest in, you're going to make money? I find that you need outside people to tell you that, because some of my friends, they actually don't know what their power zones are, where if you're a great observer of your friends, you'll know what their power zones are. So, for example, if one of my buddies calls me with a retail name, it's an automatic short, because he's been trying to go long retail for 22 years that I've known him, and he's 0 for 0 at every moment. And at one point, he was like, I'm going to quit investing in retail. I was like, no. He's like, why? He's like, why deprive the rest of us? Doing the opposite of what you do in retail is as good as doing, like, no, don't keep doing that. But he like persists. He's obsessed with retail and losing money at it. But yet, if he's doing industrials, he makes money. And for some reasons, industrials have saved them. And by the way, not just in the last few years where industrials are literally like this, but throughout our careers together. Okay, not taking care of your life force. So your life force is your relationship with your body, your relationship with your mind, and your relationship with other people. Okay? Very smart people need to take care of their bodies. One of the reasons you see smart people leave the investment business is they lose the energy of dealing with markets. So working out, relaxing, massaging, doing things that force you to recover and over long periods of time is very important. Keeping up with emotional relationship with others, the study this concept life force, very powerful. Never developing your own style. So when my first investment coach, had me good at things that were more my style, despite my insecurities about my style, my performance went up. To this day, I'm still shocked. And being okay with that. There's something about Mrs. Market, when she feels your style, she wants to reward that. I know it sounds like cuckoo nonsense, but I really do believe that when your personality and your authenticity is imbued in your investing, that's when you get rewarded. Not getting feedback on your ideas, insights, or processes. Not knowing your talents that you have ritualized and amplified to be a strength. So for example, if you're good at field research, and by the way, we like to focus on consumer stocks because the field research is much more easier to be done, right? So how do you amplify that? Follow the 13Fs and hedge fund letters of great consumer investors. Surround yourself with other people that are great at consumer stocks and so on. Not knowing your weaknesses or negative patterns, which leads to a lack of dynamic evaluation, which I was just talking about. All right. There's a great book. I think it's called No More Mr. Nice Guy, where he talks about the paradigm. And we've noticed this in multiple aspects, that smart people often have the wrong paradigms. And what he says is that a paradigm is a roadmap we use to navigate life's journey. Everyone uses these roadmaps, and everyone assumes the map they are using is up to date and accurate. Paradigms often operate at an unconscious level, yet they determine to a large degree our attitudes and behavior. They serve as a filter through which we process life experiences. Data that does not fit our paradigm is screened out and reaches our conscious mind. One of the ways that we add value to analysts that come work for us is we find where their paradigm is wrong about investing, and we give them the concepts, the tools, and the processes to shift that paradigm. And it's one of the ways. You should never hire somebody unless you know how to improve them without him being known that he's being improved. And one of the problems with hiring the kind of guys that we like to hire, they tend to be intellectually set in their ways. So you have to improve them in a way where you're not forcing yourself upon them, and changing the paradigm is how you start doing that. And we have ways of doing that. By the way, the last part is cool. It's very important. Most paradigms are developed when we are young, naive, and relatively powerless. They are often based on the inaccurate interpretations of childhood experiences. Since they are often unconscious, they are rarely evaluated or updated. Unfortunately, these paradigms are assumed as to be 100% accurate, even when they are not. The wrong mindset. So think about paradigm as having an influence on mindset. When you change somebody's paradigm, it can have an impact on mindset. But analytical mindsets is a very powerful to actually be able to alter, especially in your own. If you see investors that have improved over long periods of time, they had a process for consciously changing their mindsets over time to be able to adapt. You saw Warren do it. You saw Charlie do it. You saw a lot of Tiger Cubs do it, especially with the influence of Steve Mandel. You saw Julian do it. You saw a lot of the Tiger Grand Cubs do it, especially after the influence of two of the best investment teachers that the world has ever seen at Columbia University. And it's very powerful, but you got to be aware of it to be able to do it. And this quote by Richard Hoyer. So Richard Hoyer was inside the CIA, and he's the one that taught CIA analysts to be better analysts, and literally put in a book called The Psychology of Intelligence Analysis. And his kid, Dick Hoyer Jr., wrote Structured Analytical Techniques, which is a must read, okay, as an analyst. And by the way, Structured Analytical Techniques, I've often thought it was wrongly named. It should actually be called Networked Analytical Techniques, because the networking advice it gives in those books are even more powerful. All right. We have, let's say, 10 more minutes, and then we'll get to questions, Ethan, okay? All right. So what are the biases? So you see, one of the problems with smart people is that they're still prone to cognitive biases and blind spots. But because they're smart, the intelligence actually amplifies these things as opposed to minimizing it. Somebody that's not so smart doesn't have that. He doesn't know about these things. That's why he rushes in, right? The first time I noticed that was in high school. In my high school, it always befuddled me that the smartest guys I know were very bad with girls, whereas all the morons were getting all the girls. I was like, how is that? I don't understand how that works. And I think sometimes smart people are really good at coming up with negative visualization as to why what they're doing is not going to work, right? She's not going to like me because of these really brilliant reasons, right? Whereas the other guy is like, yeah, I have nothing to lose. Let's go, right? And to this day, I still can't believe I would look at the cows. I don't get it. Okay, so what are the biases? Intellectual arrogance, lack of meta-rationality. So what meta-rationality is having the humility and understanding, right, that there's somebody smarter than you doing something, and that you need to minimize your own intelligence that wants to do X and go do Y, which is what the smart guy is doing, because it's more effective. It's actually harder than you think, okay? When I hear I've done 6 months of work on this, and I think the idea is bad, if the guy is long, it's almost an automatic short. Okay, why? Because you've probably done 5 months, 3 weeks, 5 days, too much work on this. Okay, be very careful whenever you hear, I've done 6 months of work on this, especially as the stock is going down. Value-itis. When you overly anchor to valuation your investment thesis, why do you own it? It's cheap. So That's not an investment thesis. Who cares if it's cheap? There's 5,000 books on value investing on Amazon. Okay, everybody's a value investor. In the 70s, when no one knew value investing, it was an advantage to be a value investor. Okay, today it's harder. It's way more competitive. I missed it bias. This is when you talk about an idea, the stock is up, and you hear somebody say, I missed it, or better yet, you think it. Time to do some work. You haven't missed anything. The best stocks are the ones that you buy at new highs. Emotional estimation, signaling validation. You have an emotional reaction about something that is not based on thought, and then you go and you only look for validation that you're right, as opposed to disconfirm the evidence that you're wrong. Loss aversion. So, like I said, this causes very smart people to be risk averse, and they make mistakes of omission, often not maximizing opportunities because they come up with extremely intelligent negative visualizations about opportunities, right? Ambiguity aversion. One of my favorite strategic thinkers, he says, we are born into a probable reality with ambiguity aversions as humans. Okay, you have to be comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable with the military calls VUCA conditions. So volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. We love VUCA conditions in markets, for example, because that's where opportunities are actually created. Justice mechanism. So a lot of smart people have the justice mechanism where they want to see justice. And you often see short sellers that have that when management teams are committing fraud. They're like, these guys are fraudsters, and they want to short the stock, not realizing that they don't set the price and they're shorting into massive retail buying that is not seeing the fraud, and they can lose a lot of money. As a short seller, you have to be very, very careful about mechanism. Self-sabotage, the self-destruct button. One thing I noticed, very smart people, they get rich, and there's a self-destruct button that they keep pushing, and they start losing money. We all have it in humans, by the way. I'm not saying, by the way, I'm prone to probably every bias in here, but we have systems and processes. Usually my friends that thank God love me dearly are like, hey, jackass, you're doing that again. Okay, and stop it, right? Projecting too much of the past into the future. The game has changed. The internet, social media, narratives, new players, quant funds, ETF, passive, have changed the game. You can't take a look at a past situation and project it into the future anymore. There's novelty now. It's very, very different. And then pro-cyclical behavior, which usually you're making money, so you jack up risk, you jack up exposure, and you come into a loss and you start losing the money that you put in. All right, here are the blind spots. High personal and business overhead, a killer for smart people. Be very careful as you succeed that you jack up your personal overhead. It amplifies almost every bias you have and creates blind spots. While you're focusing on your overhead and the cost and how expensive it is, opportunities are going by, threats are going by, you're not seeing them. Goal-induced blindness or having the wrong goals. So for example, in our investing, one of our goals is mentoring, learning, and teaching. It's actually, even though it seems like a selfless act, it's actually something that helps us make money as well. The echo chamber problem, where you have the same source of information, same people that you speak with, and you don't have diversity in them, and it forces you to lose money. Stale networks, same thing. Having the wrong social influences causes massive blind spots. Structural and conditional blindness. We tend to walk around regulatory, physical structures, social structures, and almost are blind to it, right? We're blind to the economic, regulatory forces that are having a massive impact on our lives or pushing us backwards. You have to wake up to these things. In the investment business, there's either micro guys or macro guys. But there's actually one level called the meso. So you have the micro, the meso, and the macro. And the meso is one step above the micro. You have to know the influences that are having an impact on you, your businesses, and it's only one step above. Don't go too far because I think really real macro investing is very difficult. We've studied it. Eventually, we will evolve to that, but we don't have what it takes yet to get there. If you study the evolution of Stan Druckenmiller and George Soros, they started out as equity guys first and then evolved to macro. But start getting good at the meso, right? And then the geography and culture of your thought. In the West, we tend to see things very differently than in the East. There's a great book on this. It's called The Geography of Thought. A second great book on this, I'm obsessed with the writer. He's a French sinologist called François Julien. The book is called Treaties on Efficacy, which is an analysis of Chinese strategic thought and Western strategic thought. Brilliant. And then being stunted in one part of your be merry as a last. So body, emotion, mind, environment, relationship, ideas. If you're missing things in those areas, that can have a big impact and create a blind spot. Okay. Tools to mitigate your blind spots. I have to speed up because I have 5 minutes. Price implied expectations. Very powerful to do. It's a lesson from Michael Mauboussin. Read his book, Expectational Investing. Tutorial 8 for free on his website teaches you how to do these things. Do it, okay? When I started out gambling, I loved it because a gambling position has embedded odds in it that you can figure out. And then you can actually estimate your probability of winning, losing, and what your profit margin is going to be. When I got to investing, it was actually very difficult to understand what odds are priced into a stock. Well, guess what? Mauboussin gives you that process. Very powerful. Teaching and mentoring. Even at your age today, start teaching and mentoring younger people. Very important. Look for mentors. I have a saying, it's from my grandfather actually. When you're younger, you need older mentors. But when you're older, you need younger mentors because they remind you how to be young again. It's one of the reasons why I like to spend time with younger people. Right? Value principles. Get to know them. Value investing isn't dead, okay? It's just that there needs to be an adaptation of how you apply value principles. The Pre-Mortem and the Pre-Parade by Gary Klein and Danny Kahneman. So pre-mortem is a process of saying, hey, I'm about to make an investment or a decision. If 5 years from now it ends up that decision was a catastrophe, why did it go wrong? And take those reasons and solve for them. It's very powerful. But also do a pre-parade, which is something I learned from venture capital, where they say, hey, the mistake is not losing $1. The mistake is when you've lost access to $1,000 from investing one. Is you say 5 years from now, this thing has been a multi-bagger. Why did it happen? Or why did we miss it 5 years from now? It's very powerful psychologically to do it, especially as a team. ACH, Analysis of Competing Hypothesis, very powerful process that you get from that book, The Psychology of Intelligence Analysis. Okay? And then Scenarios, Timelines, and Indicators, also that you get from that book. Bull-bear debates, very powerful to, if you're long, to find a short seller and debate him on the idea. If you're short, find a guy that's long, debate him on the idea. There are services that you can pay on Wall Street to get that. One of our most used tools is the bull-bear debate. In fact, sometimes I don't know anything about an idea. I literally will study it for 20 minutes and come up with a thesis and debate a short seller on it long. Or if he wants me to debate the short side, I'll debate the short side. It's a very powerful way to learn. Here's some of the books I would recommend. The Intelligence Trap, Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me. One of my favorites on here is Military Misfortunes, How Smart Militaries Make Catastrophic Mistakes. When Genius Failed, which is on long-term capital management and how they failed, why smart people make big money mistakes and how to correct them. And then one of the best ways to understand narrative investing today, which is the halo effect. You have to read Michael Mauboussin's research. This one, methods to improve decision making, very powerful. Elon has a process that I love. We just did a study on this actually, and it improved our process. Is like, what are the requirements of our investment process, and how do we kind of make them less dumb? Like, for example, a lot of investment firms require meeting management to make investments. We don't. Why do you need to meet a CEO? Like, literally, no father ever thinks his daughter is unattractive. No mother ever thinks her son is unattractive. Of course, the CEO is going to say good things. It's a waste of time sometimes. If you meet with a CEO, talk to him about his competition, about his suppliers, what's going on in the industry, fine. You talk to him about the business, that's not a requirement for us. Delete the parts of process step. For example, on the short side, we've deleted a lot of process steps. To solve the problems of the short side. Optimize. How do you make a step or a process, a part of the process better? Accelerate. How do you speed it up? How do you automate? With AI, there's certain things that we've automated, but today people are automating things without doing the previous four. Very dangerous. Michael Mauboussin wrote a memo called Alpha and the Paradox of Skill, which is a must read of how to find weak games to compete against. All right. Final, mentor and teach. Use coaches. One of the latest things we've been teaching, and I'll stop with this, by the way, is as a younger person, start watching out for the decade of your 40s and your 50s, both men and women. And for many people, this is a lost decade. And often because they don't understand what's happening. Men go through a form of menopause. Women go through a form of menopause, and it starts impacting your energy, how you think, your mood, and all of these things. And the midlife crisis dynamics are really real. Okay. You don't have to worry about that. And you're probably saying, why is this boomer talking about this shit? But trust me, it's coming. Okay. And the earlier you manage for it, the better. In many ways, for me, my 40s was a lost decade. It really was. Because even though I was aware of it, there were certain things. And I find almost everybody goes through it. There's a great data set that Michael Mauboussin showed me once about investment managers, how their performance drops in their 40s. Okay, really interesting. Okay, build leverage into your personal and business life. Not the ability to borrow money, but capital, code, content, community, contractual, structural, and conditional leverage. Very powerful. I have a YouTube talk on this. Go do it. Have a spiritual practice. Very important for smart people to have a spiritual practice. Have thought partners in confidence. The power pair or the power of the unstoppable two. I'm very lucky to have confidence that if I have an idea, I can pitch it to them. And they're very gentle with my ego about giving me feedback on it. Okay, you need people like that. You want to be people like that and know how to build the right ritual. So we have a ritual, for example, called the Morning 90. Every day, even today, I wake up, I read 3 hedge fund letters, 1 investment memo, and I go through the 13F of 1 investment manager looking for ideas every day. And that process feeds my competitive advantage. I have 4 or 5 things I'm world class at. I need to do something on a daily basis that feeds these things. Find what that is for you. AI is going to amplify smart people's mistakes. Okay, people are using these AI tools, and they're making really big mistakes using them. Okay, an analyst has 5 skills they need to hone and develop: recall of past patterns, mental visualization of a business within the feedback loops of its ecosystem, to read between the lines, to make leaps of judgment, and to synthesize. AI tools inhibit or dull all these investment skills, especially in rookies. Okay, so watch out for these tools. Learn analog training. Thanks so much, guys, by the way, for listening. If you have any questions, hit me up on LinkedIn afterwards if there's any way I can be helpful.
Oh, for sure. And thanks so much for your talk. There were a lot of interesting insights there. I think I definitely related to the overstimulation and the reliance on Gen AI. Like, I think because you have so much access to these tools, we have so much access to these tools, it's very easy to get intellectually lazy and just pull out my phone over here and just go straight to the Chat GPT app and ask something and have a discussion, because the speed of information is rapid. And I guess my first question is about that. It's about this intellectual laziness. And I guess I'm curious how you think that, what are the specific impacts that you think will come from that within the markets? Do you think there will be a lot more BS retail ideas? And I mean, because that's the one thing I can think of as a clear, it amplifies a certain story. Let's say there's a certain AI narrative that a lot of news outlets are talking about, and obviously that text data gets fed into the models, and we have this kind of recursive thing going on. And, because that's one thing I can think of. And I'm curious, if someone identifies something like that, is it exactly a short? Because these things can go much higher before they can go lower. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So, great question. The first is shitcoins and fantasy stocks. Okay, so there's a group of stocks out there in the stock market that retail keeps buying. And if they had a knowledge of history, they kind of know how that story is going to end. You have $20 billion market cap companies that are never going to earn the free cash flow that has to actually justify those valuations. Okay, so just imagine a $20 billion market cap company at a 5% discount rate has to generate $1 billion in free cash flow every year to just justify the market cap at no growth. Assuming a 20% free cash flow margin, that $1 billion, you got to do $5 billion in sales. Okay? If you take their cost per widget that they're selling and you take that $5 billion divided by it, they have to do a number of units that they don't even know how to manufacture that. So some of these businesses that have zero revenue, that have large market caps, will never make the free cash flow to justify the market caps in the long term. And the short term, people are not doing deep work on them, and they're bidding them up and buying them on narratives, right? And narratives are amplified by AI tools. By the way, so one of the problems of these AI tools that it hasn't escaped the manipulators that people are using these tools. Already smart marketers are designing pieces of content that the LLMs pick up on and put as a link with their product, and to the link if you click through it so that you go and pay the product. The smarties out there that are way smarter than we will ever be, they're figuring out, hey, how can we use this to growth hack the system? Okay? So you're going to need to be careful. I think AI is going to amplify one of my favorite lines from I'm obsessed with Chris Nolan. Almost everybody, my personality. If you ask somebody my personality type, what's your favorite movie? The Batman trilogy is always in there. And theatricality and deception, are going to be amplified by AI. So you have to be very, very careful with that. And the younger generations that don't have analog training, that haven't read the books, that don't know the historical context, that just look at snippets and snack on information, as opposed to sitting with the book under constraints and really thinking about it, they're going to lose a lot of money. We're already seeing it happen.
Another thing you talked about during your talk is this idea that you have multiple networks. So I think you said Southeast Asia, Europe. Did you grow up in Paris? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Partly Haiti and France and Switzerland and the United States.
Okay.
I lived in Brazil at one point. I lived in Jamaica at one point, and I've traveled. One of my goals is to go to every country in the world. I think I'm halfway there by now, actually. The other day I did cheat a little bit. I crossed from Sweden into Norway on a bridge and came back. I'm like, check. I need to go back.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Um, hey, I just love for you to expand on that. Are you talking about different geographies, different industries, or is it just everything in general? Just so that you can have as diverse inputs of thought.
Of course. So for example, um, your network needs to be structured by age, geography, sectors, and then whatever passion projects you have. So for example, a lot of people, they have their people they know in work, an extended network, people they know in their country club, and that's all. A lot of political problems in the United States today, for example, is guys that don't know what it's like in a steel mill town in Ohio, that steel mill is no longer there. You don't have that perspective. So for example, if I'm learning, so my passion project right now is learning producing and movie directing. Okay. And I've been expanding my network of producers, and I've met a couple directors. Unbelievable what we're learning there. Okay. And we've been literally stealing stuff from there. How can we apply that to investing? Right. So you want to develop that network. And then what you see is that when you're asking for advice, you can ask different people in different networks. And there's two processes that come from that. One of them is wisdom is multiple perspectives. When you get multiple perspectives on something, you tend to be wiser on it. And the second is leading versus lagging indicator analysis. So if, for example, on a stock, you talk to a day trader on it, then you talk to an option market maker on it, then you talk to a long only guy on it, then you talk to a short seller on it, you talk to a macro guy on it. At the end, you will notice who is a leading indicator on the idea, who is a lagging indicator on the idea. It's a very powerful thing to do. So for example, one of the things I always advise young people whenever they join a city is join at least 2 or 3 different clubs. Try to join the Brook, try to join the Racket Club in New York City, try to join the University Club. And those networks are very powerful. Leverage the alumni network of your school. You belong to that. Okay. So you literally want to classify by network. I'm probably going to do a piece on networking. I think I may have actually on that, because people don't know how to network in the investment business. What's funny is that I'm known as a good networker. I'm actually not. It's that the techniques I use are really good. Right. So, and one of them is you have to belong to multiple networks. One of the latest ones for me, a lot of my friends are either on the board or involved with the Santa Fe Institute, which is a complexity and network theory think tank. Very important to study what these guys are up to. Some of the earliest VCs that were able to value of social media had read a book called Complexity by Mitch Waldrop that came from the Santa Fe Institute. And it's still an edge today, by the way, to read that stuff.
And going back to the self-regulation for a young person, sometimes I feel, I don't know if it was this morning, I'll pull out my phone and I'll just check messages immediately, check Instagram, and just get hammered with all the stimulation imaginable. And I'm just curious, what does your typical morning routine look like? And I say that question knowing that what your routine should look like should be very different to ours, because we're students but you are trying to make the best investment decisions possible. Yeah, what does it look like? I'm curious.
Okay, so it sounds weird. It is. And it's not as if I don't have an addiction to this thing either. Okay, I'm a junkie. And not only that, we own Meta, so I have to be constantly on Instagram. I'm addicted to Instagram. Okay. And Instagram knows me very, very well. It's really interesting what Instagram wants to show me sometimes, especially if you go to your search page. Sometimes I really don't like who Instagram thinks I am, but fine. the mornings to emotionally self-regulate are very important, because the initial conditions that you set in the morning can drive your entire day, right? So what I do on a daily basis, and also, by the way, I'm a bit reluctant always of talking about this stuff, because people think you do this, you're going to be successful. No, that has nothing to do with success. Because I know very successful people that literally wake up with a cigarette and a cup of coffee. Okay, like literally a disaster way to nicotine and caffeinate early in the morning. Don't do that. Okay, like but what a morning routine is going to do is protect your resilience, longevity, and self-regulation. So me, I wake up and I get a Theragun or a rumble roller, and I literally give myself a massage. And the reason for that is, when you're responsible for capital, as you're sleeping, you tense up because of all the risks you're taking. And your body, when you wake up, especially I'm 51 now, you feel more tense. So you got to trigger your life force by working on your body first. And the way that you do that is actually not working out, is actually something that relaxes you. So a hot shower and a Theragun or rumble roller massage. You guys know what a rumble roller is? It's a roller with nubs on it. It looks like a torture rack. And then you rumble your body on it. It detenses you. After that, I drink a liter of water. You need, when you get older, you dehydrate faster. It's actually one of the things that also makes you look older. It's not that you have to hydrate more. Younger, you need to hydrate less. You still need to hydrate, but as you get older, you have to hydrate a lot more. And water, when it goes through your system, actually wakes every system up in your body. And then the third thing I do is I exercise. So that's my morning routine. And then I have usually a breakfast, which is usually very heavy on fats. It's one of the greatest harms nutrition has ever done. The nutritional industry is tell you that fats are bad for you. You actually need healthy fats for thinking, especially for the brain. And then after that, I do my morning 90, which is 3 hedge fund letters, 1 investment memo, 1 13F. That's my morning routine. There are days when I meditate, especially if I'm having a problem coming up with insights. One of the things that we use to meditate, by the way, is I wear earplugs when I meditate. Okay, it's or when I work. This is actually one of the best things that you can do, because I'm very distraction prone. Have you ever seen Up? Squirrel. I'm Doug the dog. So I have to put earplugs on when I work, shut down my phone, and just like focus on stuff. That's what my morning routine looks like. Don't do violence to yourself in the morning. These guys that are plunging into ice cold baths when they first wake up. No. That's stupid. You're literally jacking up your adrenaline, jacking up all sorts of negative hormones. No, don't do that in the morning. Wake up gently. Don't do yourself violence in the morning.
And, it's the end of, we have 4 minutes left, but a lot of the people here.
You can go longer if you want.
No worries. Yeah. Okay. No worries. But a lot of the people here are very smart, very driven people. I've met them, spoken to them, good friends with a lot of them. And if there's one lesson that you think a young, intelligent, driven person should take from this talk, like one thing, what would it be?
Triads. So what you did with me, where you cold called me, I happen to be receptive to cold calls because I myself cold call a lot. Right? And we actually design our content strategy so that smart people find us. Right? But this thing of cold reaching out to somebody that you don't know and then building a relationship with them, adding value to them, never lose that. Ever. One of the best ways to add value is you meet with somebody and you ask them, whether young or old, what are your fears and frustrations? what are your wants and aspirations across categories? And then you go back, and if you study a way of adding value to them, call them back and said, hey, you know that problem you're dealing with, that fear and that frustration? Have you considered this to solve for it? One of the best ways to solve other people's problems is to introduce them to somebody that can help them solve that problem. Is how you create triads, which is a group of 3 people in your network. That's the biggest leverage that you can take as a smart person, because it's going to take you out of your echo chamber. It's how you create emergence, how you create luck. It's how you create business opportunities. It's how you create, by the way, don't get me wrong, there are triads that go wrong, but usually the cost of them are totally de minimis versus the upside that you get. The amount of time that a great investment idea comes to us, and we realize that it came to us because of a triad that we created a decade ago. I introduced one of my best friends to a venture capitalist once, who was a venture capitalist to another person. And then 2 years later, they asked me to be on the board of a company they were in. And it's been one of the biggest investments I've ever made on the private side. Right. So that's the one advice that I would follow.
Another thing for a lot of these people that I've met, a lot of them go to great schools. And I think that, I studied at UCL and it was a good school, and I'm at Columbia. And one of the things I notice with intelligent people who go to good schools, is they can generally get into a position where they're in love with their ideas and they're so convinced they're right because they're surrounded by other people who are extremely smart, and they're consistently told, you are winners, you are the future of society, you are going to rule the world, you deserve the world. And sometimes I find it extremely funny, and I find myself, being an ambitious person, falling into this trap, going, oh yeah, I've realized something that's, this is crazy. And I guess I'd like to hear it from you, who's been around winners, done extremely well for himself financially. How do you avoid these pitfalls in thought? And how do you make sure that you constantly remain that intellectual humility that everyone needs?
So one is you have to expose your ideas to a wider public. Taking an idea that you have, putting it into a YouTube talk, and then having people comment on it, or somebody will be like, you're an idiot. Somebody else will be like, hey, by the way, have you considered X? One of the insights that's changed my life, literally changed it, was I gave a talk on idea ingredients. It's on YouTube, Yale University, idea ingredients. And I listed 20 idea ingredients, right? And my business partner looked at the ingredients. He's like, you're making a mistake. And I was like, what's the mistake? He's like, well, these 20 matter, but at any one time, there's really 4 of those ingredients that are 80% of the value. You should only focus on these 4. And when I said to him, look, do me a favor, pick the 4 you think, I'll pick the 4 I think are the most important. We picked the same 4. And since then, that idea criteria has been literally multiplying our performance. It would have never happened had I not taken my ideas if I cherished it. Such a competitive advantage to know this. No, put it out there. If your ideas, including investment ideas, are really good, when people hear it, usually they're going to hate it. Okay? That's also good feedback. Why are they hating it? Right? There's a lot of really powerful competitive advantage that can be designed from that. So put yourself out there. Don't think that you're right. If you think in your mind when you're debating somebody, I know I'm right, he's wrong, it's time to understand the other person's perspective. Literally turn on your empathy muscle and like, help me understand the way you're thinking. Like, what's going on? And dig in. The intellectual arrogance kills smart people. Intellectual arrogance is even worse when it's secret. A lot of passive aggressive guys in the investment business have this secret intellectual arrogance. I'm right, but I'm not going to tell you I'm right. I'm just going to keep that as a secret. Dude, Mrs. Market is gonna slap you around like her little bitch. Okay, like it's when you see it happen, it's always violent. When smart people lose money, it's not, they lose 10%. It's always a catastrophe. Catastrophe. Like drawdowns, bro. Drawdowns. I do have to run just now. Thank you so much, Ethan, for organizing it.
Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Of course. Hope it was helpful.